father sent his stupid Chinese daughter to a lonely cowboy. It was his biggest mistake ever. The wind that morning carried dust through the streets of Red Hollow, and with it came a wagon nobody had expected. It rolled in slow, pulled by two tired mules, and the man holding the reins wore a black coat too heavy for the season. Beside him sat a young woman, small in frame, her hair pulled back tight, her hands folded in her lap, as if she were holding a bird she did not want to release. The man was Mr. Lee. He had come from San Francisco, then through Sacramento, then through 3 smaller towns, where no one would take what he was offering. His daughter May was 19. She had not spoken a full sentence in 2 weeks. Mr. Lee had a paper folded in his coat pocket. On it was the name of a rancher who lived 8 miles outside Red Hollow. The rancher was called Caleb Doyle. The paper said Caleb was a widower, that his wife had died 4 winters ago, that he lived alone with his cattle and a single hired hand, and that he had once written to a marriage broker in San Francisco asking for a quiet woman who would not mind hard country. Mr. Lee had answered that letter not because he respected it, but because he wanted May gone. He thought his daughter was slow. He thought she was stupid. She had been born too quiet, and quiet things in his world were always defective. She had failed at the laundry. She had failed at the seamstress shop. She had even failed in his eyes at being a daughter, because she did not weep when her mother died, only sat by the window and watched birds. He had decided that a lonely cowboy in a place with no Chinese girls and no expectations would take what he could get. He pulled the wagon up outside the general store and climbed down. He did not help May down. She climbed down on her own, careful with her skirt, careful with her small leather case that held everything she owned. 2 men on the porch watched her without smiling. Mr. Lee went inside the store and asked the keeper for directions to Caleb Doyle's ranch. The keeper, a thin man named Hollis, looked past him at May standing in the dust and frowned. "You bringing that girl to Caleb?" Hollis said. "I am bringing her to be married," Mr. Lee answered. Hollis chewed something behind his teeth and said nothing for a moment. Then he gave directions. He said to follow the creek road north until it forked, then take the left fork past the dead cottonwood, then keep on for another 2 miles until the fences started. Mr. Lee thanked him and left. Hollis came out onto the porch and watched the wagon go. He shook his head once and went back inside. The road to the ranch was rough, and the mules complained. May watched the country pass. It was not like anything she had seen. The hills were low and pale. The grass was the color of straw, and the sky was so wide it seemed to push down on the land. There were no people. There were no buildings. There were only fence posts now and then, leaning like tired old men. Her father did not speak to her. He had not spoken to her since the day before, when he had told her she was a burden and that this was her last chance. She had nodded. She always nodded. Inside her chest there was a small, hard place that had grown over the years like a stone in a riverbed, smooth and silent. She did not cry. She had stopped crying when she was 12. After an hour the fences began. Then a low ranch house came into view, set back against a stand of pines. There was a barn behind it, a corral, a windmill, and a long bunkhouse with a tin roof. Cattle grazed on the slope. A dog ran out to meet the wagon, barking once, then deciding the visitors were not worth the trouble. A man came out of the barn. He was tall, with a beard going gray at the edges, and he wore a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He carried a hammer in one hand. He stopped when he saw the wagon, and he stood very still. Mr. Lee climbed down. He smoothed his coat. He approached the tall man and said, "Mr. Caleb Doyle?" "That's me," the man said. "I am Mr. Lee, from San Francisco." We exchanged letters through the broker. Caleb's eyes shifted past Mr. Lee to May, who was still sitting in the wagon. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at Mr. Lee. "You brought her all this way," Caleb said. It was not a question. "She is ready," Mr. Lee said. "She is obedient. She will work. She does not speak much, which I think you will find peaceful." Caleb set the hammer down on a fence post. He walked past Mr. Lee and stood beside the wagon. He looked up at May without smiling and without frowning. His eyes were the color of weathered wood. "Miss," he said, "my name is Caleb. Would you like to come down?" May looked at him. She had not expected the question. She had expected an order, or a grunt, or nothing at all. She nodded once, and she climbed down. Caleb did not offer his hand, because he could see she did not want it. But he stood close enough that if she stumbled, he could catch her. She did not stumble. Mr. Lee produced a paper from his coat. It was the agreement. He had written it himself, in careful English. It said that for the sum of $100, his daughter May was given to Caleb Doyle in marriage, and that Mr. Lee would not seek to return her or to reclaim any property she carried. Caleb read the paper. He read it twice. Then he looked at Mr. Lee the way a man looks at something he has found dead in the grass. "I'm not buying a woman," Caleb said. "It is not buying," Mr. Lee said. "It is a dowry in reverse. A custom." "Not my custom," Caleb said. There was a pause. Mr. Lee's face tightened. He had counted on the $100. He had counted on it more than he had counted on getting rid of May, because the journey had cost him almost everything he had. "Mr. Doyle," he said, lowering his voice, "I have come a long way. I have no place to take her back to. If you do not want her, I will leave her on the road." Caleb looked at him for a long time. May stood between them, her eyes on the ground, her hands still folded. "You do that," Caleb said. It was not a question either. "I would," Mr. Lee said. He meant it. Caleb turned and walked to the porch of his house. He went inside. When he came back, he had a leather pouch in his hand. He counted out $100 in coin and bills, and he held it out to Mr. Lee. "This isn't for her," Caleb said. "This is so you'll go and never come back. If I see you on my land again, I'll shoot you. Do you understand?" Mr. Lee nodded. He took the money. He folded it carefully into his coat. He did not look at May. He climbed back onto the wagon, turned the mules, and rode out the way he had come. He did not say goodbye. May watched the wagon until it was a small dark shape against the pale hills. Then she watched the place where it had been. Then she looked down at her hands, which were still folded. Caleb stood beside her. He did not touch her. "Miss Lee," he said, "I'm not going to marry you. I don't know you. You don't know me. That paper your father wrote isn't worth the ink it took. But I'm not putting you on the road either. You can stay in the house. There's a spare room. It has a lock on the inside of the door. I'll sleep in the bunkhouse with Tom until you decide what you want to do. Do you understand me?" May looked up at him. She understood about half the words, but she understood his face, which was tired and honest and a little angry at someone who was not her. She nodded. "Can you say my name?" he asked. "Caleb," she said. It was the first word she had spoken since the wagon. "Good," he said. "I'll call you May, if that's all right." She nodded again. He picked up her leather case. He carried it to the house. She followed him. The house was small and clean in the way a man cleans, when he is the only one to notice. There was a main room with a stove, a table, 2 chairs, and a rocking chair by the window. There was a bedroom off to the left, where Caleb slept, and there was a smaller room off to the right, which had been used for storage. Caleb opened the door to that room. There was a narrow bed, a chest, a window. He set her case down on the chest. "It needs sweeping," he said. "I'll bring you a broom. There's water in the pump out back. The privy is behind the barn. Tom is my hired hand. He's a good man. He won't bother you. If anything bothers you, you come find me." All right, she said. He left her there. He shut the door behind him gently. She stood in the middle of the small room for a long time. Then she sat down on the bed. She did not cry. She had not cried in 7 years. But for the first time in many of those years, she felt something that was not the hard stone in her chest. She felt the absence of her father, and the absence felt like air. That night Caleb slept in the bunkhouse with Tom, who was a wiry old man with one bad eye and a habit of humming hymns while he worked. Tom did not ask questions. Caleb told him only that there was a young woman staying in the house, that she had been brought there by a cruel man, and that she was to be treated with respect at all times. Tom nodded. Tom had seen things in his life. He understood without needing details. The first week, May did not come out of the house much. She came out to the pump for water. She came out to the privy. She stood on the porch in the evenings and watched the light go down behind the hills. Caleb left her food on the table every morning before he went to work, and every evening, when he came back, the food was gone and the dishes were washed. By the second week, she began to do small things without being asked. She swept the porch. She washed Caleb's work shirts in the basin behind the house and hung them on the line. She put wildflowers in a jar on the table. Caleb noticed. He did not say anything, because he did not want to scare her. But he noticed. By the third week, she began to cook. She found his stove, his flour, his salt, his bacon. She did not know how to make the kind of food he ate, but she tried. The first biscuits she made were hard as stones. Caleb ate 2 of them and said they were the best he'd had in months. She looked at him to see if he was lying. He was lying, but she could see he was lying kindly, and it was the first kind lie anyone had told her in her life. By the 4th week, she could speak in short sentences. She had been listening. She had been listening her whole life, because listening had been safer than speaking. Now she let the words come out, slow and careful. "You like the eggs?" she asked one morning. "I like the eggs," Caleb said. "I make more tomorrow." "That'd be fine." She nodded. He nodded. They ate. Tom came in from the bunkhouse and ate with them sometimes, and Tom would tell long, quiet stories about places he had been, and May would listen and sometimes ask a word she did not know. Tom would explain it. Caleb would listen too, because Tom told stories Caleb had never heard, even though they had worked together for 6 years. A month passed. Then, too, Caleb was not in love with May. He had loved his wife, and his wife was buried under the pine tree on the south slope, and he visited her grave every Sunday. He did not want another wife. He had told the broker that, in the letter, although the broker had clearly not listened. But he liked May. He liked the way she watched things. He liked that she noticed when a fence post was leaning before he did. He liked that she had begun, in the 3rd month, to laugh sometimes, small laughs, surprised by themselves, when Tom said something foolish. She was not stupid. She was not slow. Caleb had figured that out within the 1st week. She was careful. She was a person who had been told her whole life that she was wrong, and she had decided that the safest thing was to be quiet until she was sure. Once she was sure of a thing, she did it well. She learned the names of all the cattle within a month. She learned to read the weather from the way the cottonwoods moved. She learned to shoot a rifle, after Caleb showed her once, and by the end of the summer, she could hit a tin can at 50 yards more reliably than Tom could. There were small moments in those first months that Caleb kept for himself, the way a man keeps a smooth stone in his pocket. There was the morning he came in from the corral and found that May had repaired a tear in his shirt that he had not asked her to repair, and the stitches were so fine he had to hold the shirt to the window to see them. There was the afternoon she had asked him, very quietly, what the word was for the small bird that came every evening to the fence post by the kitchen window, and he had said sparrow, and she had said it back to him, and the word had sounded different in her mouth than it had ever sounded in his. There was the night a storm came over the hills with no warning, and she had risen from her bed and gone out into the rain to bring in the laundry from the line before he had even reached the door. And when he had come into the kitchen, she was standing there with the wet basket in her arms, and her hair was loose for the first time he had seen it. And she had not noticed, because she had been busy, and he had turned away to give her privacy. But he had remembered that she had let her hair down without thinking, which was the smallest thing and the largest thing at once. He did not speak of any of these moments. He was not a man who spoke of moments, but he kept them, and the keeping changed him, although he did not yet know how. Tom noticed before Caleb did. Tom noticed because Tom had been alive a long time and had watched many people, and Tom had seen this kind of change in a man before. One evening in late August, Tom said to Caleb, while they were mending a stretch of fence on the east line, "Boss." "Yeah," Caleb said. "That girl in your house." "Yeah, she going to stay." Caleb was quiet for a while. He pulled the wire tight and tied it off. He wiped his hands on his trousers. "I don't know," he said. "You want her to." Caleb looked at Tom. Tom was looking at the fence, not at him, which was a kindness. "I think I do," Caleb said. "All right," Tom said. That was the entire conversation. They did not speak of it again. But Tom began, after that, to do small things differently, to mention to May when there was going to be a hard frost, so she could cover the small herb patch behind the house, to bring her the first eggs from the new hens before Caleb saw them, to call her by her name and not by Miss. May noticed these things. She did not know why Tom had begun to do them, but she felt the warmth of them, the way a person feels the warmth of a fire even with their back turned to it. One evening in the late summer, Caleb came in from the south pasture with a cut on his arm. He had been mending wire, and the wire had snapped. The cut was deep. He was bleeding through his shirt. May did not panic. She sat him down at the table. She fetched clean water and clean cloth. She cleaned the cut and looked at it carefully. Then she went outside and came back with a handful of green leaves she had been growing in a small patch behind the house. Leaves she had brought seeds for from San Francisco in a paper packet inside her case. She crushed the leaves between two stones and made a paste. She pressed the paste into the cut. She bound it with cloth. "What is that?" Caleb asked. "Stops the bad," she said. "My mother. She showed me." "Your mother was a doctor?" "No," May said. "She knew plants. She knew many things." "Your father told me you didn't know anything," Caleb said. May was quiet for a moment. She tied the last knot in the bandage. Then she said, "My father did not look." Caleb watched her face. There was no anger in it. There was just a fact, stated the way a person states the weather. The cut healed in 4 days, clean and without infection. Tom, who had had a wound go bad on him once and lost 2 fingers because of it, looked at Caleb's arm and shook his head in wonder. "Boss," Tom said, "I think you got yourself a hand worth 2 of me." "I know it," Caleb said. The autumn came. The grass turned the color of old gold. Caleb began to take May with him on the rides to check the herd, because she had asked, and because he had stopped being surprised by what she could do. She rode well after the 3rd week. She rode well enough by the 6th that he sometimes forgot to watch her, which was the highest compliment he gave anyone on horseback. It was on one of those rides, in mid-October, that they came across the trouble. There was a creek that ran along the western edge of Caleb's land. Across the creek was open range, country that belonged to nobody in particular, but which a man named Asa Garrick had been treating as his own for the better part of a decade. Garrick ran a big outfit out of the next county, and he had been pushing east for years, putting up fences where no fences had been, running off small ranchers who could not afford to fight him. Caleb had been fighting him quietly for 2 years. He had refused to sell. He had refused to be bought. He had refused to move his herd off the open range when Garrick's men told him to. Garrick had not yet sensed serious trouble, but Caleb knew it was coming. On that October ride, the trouble came. 3 men were waiting on the far side of the creek. They were on horseback. They had rifles across their saddles. The lead man was named Wade. He worked for Garrick. He was the kind of man who smiled when he was about to do something cruel. "Doyle," Wade called across the water. "We need to talk." Caleb pulled up his horse. May pulled up beside him. He glanced at her once. She was watching Wade, very still. "Talk then," Caleb said. "Mr. Garrick is making his last offer," Wade said. $1,200 for the whole place. You take it today. You ride out tomorrow. You don't take it, things get sad." "Things have been sad," Caleb said. "I'm used to sad." Wade smiled. He looked at May. He looked at her for too long. "Didn't know you had a girl out here, Doyle," Wade said. "Pretty little China girl. That's interesting." "You'll keep your eyes off her," Caleb said. His voice was very quiet. "I'll keep my eyes where I please," Wade said. "It's open range, isn't it? You said so yourself." The other 2 men with Wade laughed. They were not nice laughs. Caleb's hand moved toward the rifle in his scabbard. He did not pull it. He just rested his hand on it. "You ride home, Wade," Caleb said. "You tell Garrick the answer is no. You tell him it's going to keep being no. And you tell him that if he sends a man across that creek onto my land, that man isn't going home." Wade was about to answer when something happened that none of them expected. May spoke. "You," she said. She was looking straight at Wade. Her voice was small, but it carried. Wade laughed. "She talks. Look at that. You smile when you scare people," May said. "I have seen men like you. In the city. They smile and smile. Then one day they smile at the wrong person, and they do not smile anymore." Wade stopped laughing. "Is that a threat, China girl?" "It is a true thing," May said. "I am telling you so you can choose." Wade looked at her. He looked at Caleb. He looked back at her. Something flickered across his face, that he did not want to be there. Then he covered it with another smile. You got yourself a strange one, Doyle. Wade said. Real strange. We'll be seeing you. He turned his horse. His 2 men turned with him. They rode back the way they had come. Caleb and May sat on their horses by the creek for a long time after the men had gone. You shouldn't have spoken, Caleb said finally. I know, May said. He'll remember you now. He remembered me already, she said. From the first look. Caleb thought about that. He thought she was right. He thought she had been right about a lot of things. In the months he had known her, and he had stopped being surprised when she was right. They rode home. They did not speak again until they were back at the ranch. That night Caleb sat at the table with Tom and May. He told Tom what had happened. Tom listened without interrupting. When Caleb was finished, Tom rubbed his bad eye with the back of his hand and said, Boss, this is going to get worse before it gets better. I know, Caleb said. You want me to ride into town tomorrow and see if I can hire a couple more hands? Nobody'll hire on against Garrick, Caleb said. He's bought half the men in the valley. The other half are scared of him. Then what do we do? Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, We wait. We keep watch. We don't go anywhere alone. May had been listening. She had her hands folded on the table. There's another way, she said. The 2 men looked at her. What way? Caleb said. Mr. Garrick is a man. May said. Men have houses. Men have papers. Men have things they are afraid of. Find what he is afraid of. Then he stops. May, Caleb said carefully. Garrick has 100 men working for him. He has the sheriff in his pocket. He owns the bank in Wallace. He's not afraid of anything I can do to him. You do not know what he is afraid of, she said, because you have not looked. My father did not look at me, so he did not know me. You did not look at Mr. Garrick, so you do not know him. Caleb stared at her. What are you saying? I am saying, she said. Let me go to Wallace. Let me listen. Women can listen where men cannot. Nobody looks at a Chinese woman in a town. Nobody thinks she understands. I will sit in a hotel, and I will listen for a week. Then I will come back and tell you what I have heard. Then we will know. It's too dangerous, Caleb said. It is more dangerous to wait for Wade to come to us, she said. Tom had been watching her the whole time. Now he spoke. Boss, he said. She's right. Caleb looked at Tom. Then he looked at May. He felt something he had not felt in a long time, which was that he was no longer the smartest person in the room, and that he was glad of it. All right, he said. But you don't go alone. Tom goes with you. He'll stay in a different hotel. You meet him every morning at the church. If anything goes wrong, you find him. I will, she said. And May, Caleb said. Yes. If you can't find anything, you come home. You don't push. You don't try to be a hero. You come home. I will come home, she said. I want to come home. It was the first time she had used that word. Home. Caleb did not say anything. He just nodded. But after she had gone to her room that night, he sat for a long time in the rocking chair by the window, and he looked at the place where she had been sitting at the table, and he thought about how strange a thing it was that a man could lose a wife and stop expecting to ever again be at home with another human being, and then one day be surprised. May and Tom rode to Wallace the next morning. Wallace was a bigger town than Red Hollow. It had a real hotel, a bank, 2 saloons, a stockyard, and a railhead that Garrick had built mostly with his own money. There were Chinese laundries on the back streets, run by men who had come up from the rail work. There were Chinese cooks in 2 of the restaurants. There was a Chinese herbalist on a side street, an old man named Mr. Chun, who had been in Wallace for 20 years and who knew everyone. May did not stay at the hotel. She stayed with Mr. Chun in the small room above his shop. She had found him on her first afternoon by asking quietly in the laundry. Mr. Chun took one look at her and recognized her the way one quiet person recognizes another. He did not ask why she was there. He said she could sleep in the room above the shop and help him sort herbs in the morning. In return, she could listen to everything that was said in the shop, because the shop was a place where many people came and many things were said. What May learned in 7 days was this. Asa Garrick had 2 sons. The older son, Robert, ran the ranch with him, and was as hard as his father. The younger son, James, was 22 and had been sent away to school in St. Louis 3 years ago because, the herbalist said, the boy had a sickness in his lungs that the dry country was supposed to cure, but had not cured, and the city air was making him worse. But his mother insisted he stay in school and become something other than a cattleman. Asa Garrick wrote his younger son every week. Asa Garrick had been seen to weep, exactly once, in a public place, when a letter from St. Louis had told him that James had been bedridden for a month with fever. Asa Garrick loved that boy more than he loved his ranch, his money, or his older son. He had told this, in cups, to a bartender named Riley in the saloon on Front Street, and the bartender had told it to his wife, and his wife had told it to her sister, and the sister had come to Mr. Chun for headache powder and had told it to Mr. Chun, who told it to May. The other thing May learned was that Asa Garrick was being sued, quietly, by a widow named Mrs. Halloran, whose husband had died in what the sheriff had called an accident, but which everyone in town knew was not an accident. Mrs. Halloran had no money to pursue the suit. Her lawyer had withdrawn. She had been told by 3 different men to drop the matter and leave town. She had not left. She lived in a small house at the end of Pine Street with her 2 children, and she was running out of food. May wrote nothing down. She remembered everything. She had been remembering everything her whole life, because no one had ever asked her to speak. Memory was the only thing she had been allowed to own. She learned other things too, in those 7 days, things she did not yet know what to do with, but which she stored away, because that was her habit. She learned that the sheriff of Wallace, a man called Briggs, was a coward who had taken Garrick's money, but who hated himself for taking it, and who drank alone every Thursday at a back table in the second saloon. She learned that the manager of Garrick's bank in Wallace was secretly in love with a woman in Sacramento and was being blackmailed by a clerk who had read his letters. She learned that the foreman of Garrick's main ranch had a brother in prison in Texas who Garrick had promised to help and had not helped. She learned that Wade, the smiling man at the creek, had been thrown out of a town in Wyoming for something he had done to a woman there, and that the woman's brother had been looking for him for 2 years and had recently been seen in a town 2 days' ride from Wallace. She did not know how many of these things were true. Some of them were rumors that came through the herbalist's shop with the headache powders and the cough syrups. Some of them were said by drunks and might mean nothing, but she put them all in the place in her mind where she kept things, and she sorted them carefully, and she watched to see which ones would matter. Mr. Chun watched her sort. He was an old man who had crossed an ocean and a continent and had built a small shop from nothing, and he knew a clever person when he saw one. On the 5th night he said to her, over the small supper they shared at the back of the shop, "You should not go back to that ranch." May looked up from her bowl. "Why?" she said. "Because you are too smart for it. You should stay here. You should learn from me. In 10 years you would be a healer. In 20 you would be respected through the whole valley. In a ranch you will be a wife. A wife is a small thing." May thought about this for a long time before she answered. Mr. Chun waited. He was a patient man. "A wife is what the wife makes of it," May said finally. "If the wife is small, the wife is small. If the wife is large, the wife is large. The word does not decide. The woman decides. And the man, if the man is the right man. My man is the right man. So the word will be large enough." Mr. Chun nodded slowly. He did not argue. He had been wrong about people before, and he had learned not to argue with a young person who had thought a thing all the way through. "Then I will help you," he said. "What do you need?" "I need," May said, "to know where Mr. Garrick's son is staying in St. Louis. The address." Mr. Chun raised his eyebrows. "Why?" "Because if the lawyer's paper reaches St. Louis through the regular post, it may not arrive in time, or it may be opened by someone who hides it from the sun. I want to be sure. I want to know the address so that, if it is needed, a letter can be sent directly to the boy who is sick, by a hand we trust." "You will not write to him yourself?" "No, that would be cruel. He is not the one who has done wrong, but I want to know where he is, in case it is needed." Mr. Chun looked at her for a long moment. "You are not a kind person," he said. "You are a just person. That is rare." "I am trying to be both," May said. "I am still learning." Mr. Chun got the address 2 days later, through a cousin who worked at the telegraph office, and who owed him a favor for a poultice that had saved the cousin's mother. The address was a private school in St. Louis, with a sanatorium attached. May wrote the address on a piece of paper and folded it into the cloth lining of her case. She did not look at it again for many weeks, and in the end she did not need it, because Asa Garrick read the newspaper himself, and the letter went where it needed to go without her help. But she had the address. That was the thing. She had it ready. She was a person, now, who had things ready. On the 7th day, she met Tom at the church. They rode home together. She did not speak much on the ride. She was thinking. The country between Wallace and the ranch was wide and pale, the same as the country she had first seen with her father on the wagon a year before. But it looked different to her now. It was not a country pushing down on her. It was a country she had a place in. The hills did not press. The sky did not crush. She rode and Tom rode beside her, and Tom hummed his hymns under his breath, and May found she was humming too, very quietly. A song her mother had sung when she was a child. When she got back to the ranch, she sat with Caleb at the table, and she told him everything. Caleb listened. He listened the way he had learned to listen to her in the months he had known her, which was without interrupting. When she was finished, he said, "You're telling me to go to Mrs. Halloran?" "Yes," she said. "And help her bring her suit?" "Yes. And you're telling me," Caleb said slowly, "that if Garrick's lawsuit comes back, with a real lawyer this time, and the widow's case goes into a real court, that Garrick will be more afraid of that than he is of us." "He will not be afraid for the money," May said. "He has much money. He will be afraid because in a court, things are said out loud. Things are written down. His sons will read what is said. His sixth son in St. Louis will read it. His sixth son, who is not strong, who is dying maybe, will read what kind of man his father is. Asa Garrick can lose a ranch and not weep. He cannot lose his son thinking well of him." Caleb looked at her for a long time. "May," he said, "you're not what your father said you were." "I know," she said. "You're not even close." "I know," she said again. He rode to Wallace the next morning. He went to Mrs. Halloran's house. He knocked on her door. She opened it with her hand on a pistol behind her back, because she had stopped trusting men who knocked. He told her his name and his trouble. He told her about May, because May had told him to. He said that he had $200 to spend on a lawyer, and that he knew a good one in Sacramento by the name of Pritchard, who had once represented a friend of his, and who did not take Garrick's money because he had never met Garrick. He asked Mrs. Halloran if she would join her case to his. Mrs. Halloran put the pistol down. She made him coffee. She agreed. The lawyer came down from Sacramento. He was a small man with a large voice and a habit of writing letters at 3 in the morning. Within 2 weeks, he had filed papers in the county seat that named Asa Garrick as the defendant in 2 separate civil actions. One was for the death of Mr. Halloran. The other was for unlawful intimidation, fence cutting, and damage to property on the Doyle Ranch. The papers were public. They were printed in the county newspaper. They were reprinted in the Sacramento paper, because the Sacramento paper enjoyed any story that made a rich cattleman look bad. Asa Garrick read the papers. So did his older son Robert. So, eventually, did his younger son James, in his sickbed in St. Louis, because the Sacramento paper had a subscriber in Missouri, and the story crossed the country in 3 weeks. James Garrick wrote his father a letter. The letter said many things. The main thing it said was that he had always believed his father to be a hard man but a fair one, and that if the things in the newspaper were true, he was not sure he wanted to come home to such a ranch, even if his lungs got better. He said he had been thinking of becoming a teacher. He said he wanted to be the kind of man people remembered for the right reasons. Asa Garrick read the letter. He read it 3 times. Then he sat in his study for a whole day, and he did not eat, and he did not speak, and his wife was afraid to go in. 2 weeks later, Asa Garrick rode to Caleb Doyle's ranch alone, unarmed, in a clean coat. Caleb saw him coming. He came out onto the porch with his rifle in his hands, but he did not raise it. Garrick stopped his horse at the edge of the yard. He did not dismount. "Mr. Doyle," he said, "I have come to ask if we might speak." "Speak from there," Caleb said. Garrick nodded. He took a breath. "I am withdrawing my interest in your land," he said. "I am withdrawing my men from your boundaries. I will sign whatever papers your lawyer wants me to sign. I will settle with Mrs. Halloran. I will pay her $10,000 and a yearly pension for her children. I will dismiss Wade and the 2 men who were with him, and I will provide to your lawyer their sworn statements regarding any matters he wishes to know. I will not contest the suit on my conduct. I will pay damages." Caleb was silent. "In return," Garrick said, "I ask one thing. Only one. I ask that the matter of Mr. Halloran's death not be pressed in court. I ask that it be settled privately, with the widow's agreement, and that the settlement papers not be made public. I ask this because my son is sick. My son is in St. Louis. He may not live the year. I do not want him to read in the newspaper that his father is a murderer. He will read that I paid a settlement, and he will know what it means, but he will not have to read the rest. That is what I ask." Caleb thought about it. He thought about May, who was standing behind the screen door, listening. "I'll have to ask Mrs. Halloran," Caleb said. "I understand," Garrick said. "And I'll have to ask my wife," Caleb said. It was the first time he had said it out loud. He had not known he was going to say it until he said it. He did not look behind him to see if May had heard. He felt her hearing it the way a man feels the sun come out from behind a cloud. "Your wife," Garrick said. "That's right," Caleb said. Garrick looked at the screen door. He looked back at Caleb. He nodded once. "I will wait for your answer," he said. He turned his horse. He rode away. Caleb stood on the porch for a moment. Then he turned and went inside. May was standing in the kitchen. Her hands were folded. Her face was very still. "You said wife," she said. "I did. You did not ask me." "I know. You should ask me." He set the rifle down. He took off his hat. He looked at her across the small room. He saw, suddenly and clearly, the whole picture of her. The careful hands, the careful face, the carefulness that was not weakness but was the discipline of a person who had been waiting her whole life to be safe. "May," he said, "will you marry me? Not because your father sold you. Not because we have a paper. Because I'd like to spend whatever time I have left on this earth with the person who saved my ranch and my arm and probably my life. Because I love you. I don't think I knew it until just now. But I do." May was quiet for a long moment. "You ask me," she said. "Or you tell me?" "I ask," he said. "Then yes," she said. She did not smile. She rarely smiled. But her eyes changed. They were no longer the eyes of a person carrying a bird she did not want to release. They were the eyes of a person who had let the bird go and was watching it fly and was glad. Caleb crossed the kitchen. He took her hands. They were small in his. He held them as if they were precious, because they were. They did not kiss that day. They were not that kind of people. They held hands across the kitchen table, and that was enough. And Tom came in from the bunkhouse and saw them, and said nothing, and only went and put on the kettle. Mrs. Halloran agreed to the settlement. She said she would rather have her children fed, and her name cleared in the town, than her husband's killer in a jail he would probably escape from anyway. The papers were signed. The money was paid. Asa Garrick kept his word in every particular. He pulled his fences back from Caleb's line. He paid his settlement. He sent Wade away. He sent James a long letter that he wrote himself, by hand, over the course of 3 days, in which he tried to explain the man he had been and the man he was trying to become. James wrote back. James lived another 4 years. The letters between them, his wife later said, were the thing that made the last of those years bearable. Caleb and May were married in the small church in Red Hollow on a Sunday in November. Tom stood up with Caleb. Mr. Chun, the herbalist from Wallace, stood up with May. Mrs. Halloran came, with her children. Hollis the storekeeper came, and he brought a wedding gift, which was a cast-iron skillet and a small embarrassed speech. The minister was a kind old man who did not speak much, which suited May. Caleb's wife, who had died, was buried under the pine tree on the south slope. May did not visit that grave. She did not feel it was her place. But on the first Sunday after their wedding, Caleb went to the grave alone, and he sat for a long time, and he told the woman buried there about May. He told her everything. He told her he had not stopped loving her. He told her he had thought he would be alone forever. He told her that the world was strange, and he did not understand it, but that he was grateful, in a way he had not been grateful in a long time. He stayed there until the sun was low. When he came home, May had supper on the table and did not ask him where he had been, because she knew, and she was not afraid of it. The winter came. The winter was hard. They got through it. The spring came. May put in a garden, a real one, with seeds she had saved from her small patch, and seeds Mr. Chin sent her from Wallace. She grew herbs that no one in Red Hollow had ever heard of. She grew tomatoes the size of a man's fist. She grew a row of strange long beans that Caleb had never seen, and that became his favorite thing on the table. In the summer, May was pregnant. She had not expected it. Caleb had not expected it. They were both old enough, in their own ways, that they had stopped expecting things. The pregnancy was hard on her. She was small. The doctor came from Wallace twice. Mr. Chin sent herbs. Mrs. Halloran came and stayed for a week and cooked, and would not be paid for it. The baby was born on a clear, cold morning in February. It was a girl. They named her Sarah, which had been the name of Caleb's mother, and Lynn, which had been the name of May's mother. Sarah Lynn Doyle. May held the baby. She had not wept in many years. She did not weep now. But she held the baby, and she looked at Caleb, and she said, "I will tell her she is smart. Every day. Even when she is not. So she will believe it. So she will not have to learn it the hard way." "All right," Caleb said. "Every day," she said. "Every day," he agreed. Now this is the part of the story that explains the title, because the title says that the father made his biggest mistake ever. Some of you may have thought the mistake was that he gave his daughter to a man he did not know. That was a mistake, but it was not the biggest. Some of you may have thought the mistake was that he called her stupid. That was a mistake too, but it was not the biggest either. The biggest mistake was this. 3 years after the wedding, on a hot afternoon in August, a wagon came up the road to the Doyle Ranch. The wagon was old. The mules were old. The man holding the reins wore a coat that had once been black, but was now mostly dust. He had grown thin. His hair was nearly white. His hands shook on the reins. He pulled the wagon up in front of the porch, and he sat there for a long time, and he did not get down. Mr. Lee had come back. The $100 he had taken from Caleb 3 years before had not lasted long. He had gone back to San Francisco. He had tried to set up a business. The business had failed. He had borrowed money from men who should not be borrowed from. The money had not been repaid. He had been beaten badly twice. He had lost 2 fingers from his left hand. He had lost the small apartment he had lived in with May's mother before she died. He had been sleeping in the back of a fishmonger's shop in exchange for sweeping the floors. He had begged the broker who had arranged May's marriage to find him another opportunity. The broker had laughed at him. Word had gotten around in the city that Mr. Lee was a man who had sold his own daughter, and the city, even in its hard parts, did not respect a man like that. Eventually, hungry and beaten and afraid, Mr. Lee had remembered that he had a daughter. He had remembered that the daughter had married a rancher in a country where $100 went a long way. He had remembered that the rancher had been a stupid, soft man who had paid for a girl he had no right to want. He had remembered all of this in the way men remember things when they need them to be true. He had sold the last of his coat lining and bought a wagon and 2 old mules. He had made the journey east. It had taken him 3 months. He had eaten poorly. He had slept in ditches. He had arrived at Red Hollow that morning, and Hollis the storekeeper had refused to give him directions, but he had remembered the way. Now he sat in the wagon, and he looked at the ranch house, which had a new porch and a new coat of paint and a small wooden swing that a child had been playing on. The child was not on the swing now. The child was inside, taking her afternoon nap, because she was 3 years old, and she still slept in the afternoon. Mr. Lee climbed down from the wagon. He walked up to the porch. He knocked on the door. May opened the door. She was 22 years old now. She had filled out a little since the wagon. She wore a clean apron over a calico dress. Her hair was still pulled back, but it was pulled back loosely now, and there were small wisps at her temples that she did not bother to fix. She was holding a wooden spoon. She had been making bread. She did not recognize him at first. He had aged 20 years and 3. Then she did. "Father," she said. "May," he said. His voice cracked. "Daughter, I have come. I have come to see you." She looked at him. She did not invite him in. "Why are you here?" she said. It was not a question. He had a speech prepared. He had practiced it on the road. He began to say it. He said that he was sorry. He said he had been wrong. He said he had thought about her every day. He said her mother had visited him in dreams and told him to come and find her and beg her forgiveness. He said he was an old man now. He said he had nowhere to go. He said he hoped that in her heart, which had always been a good heart, she would find a place for her old father, who had only ever wanted the best for her, who had only ever been a poor man trying to make hard choices in a hard country. May let him finish. When he was done, she said, "Wait here." She closed the door. She did not lock it, but she closed it. Caleb was in the barn. She walked across the yard to the barn. He saw her coming, and he set down the harness he was mending, and he stood up. "He's here," she said. "Who?" "My father." Caleb's face changed. He reached for his rifle, which was leaning against the wall. "No," she said. "Not that." "May, I told him if he came back I'd shoot him." "I know," she said, "but I am asking you not to." "Why?" She thought about it. She was not a woman who answered quickly. She thought about the question, and she found the true answer underneath the answer that was easy. And she gave him the true one. "Because if you shoot him," she said, "then he is the end of the story. And I do not want him to be the end of the story. I want me to be the end of the story. I want our daughter to be the end of the story. Not him. He does not get to be that important." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he put the rifle down. "What do you want to do?" he said. "I want to talk to him," she said. "Then I want him to go." "You want me there?" "No, I want to do it alone. But stay near." "All right." They walked back to the house together. Caleb went to the corner of the porch and sat down on the step, the rifle across his knees, not pointed at anyone, just there. May went up to the door. She opened it. Mr. Lee was still standing on the porch. He had been weeping a little. He looked up when she opened the door. He saw Caleb on the step with the rifle. He went pale. "Father," May said, "I will say some things to you. You will listen. You will not speak until I am finished. Do you understand?" Mr. Lee nodded. He understood that he was no longer the one who decided how things would go. "You told me my whole life that I was stupid," May said. "You told me I was slow. You told me I could not learn. You told me I would never be a wife. You told me I would never be useful. You sold me to a stranger for $100 because you believed these things, and because you wanted to be rid of me. Do you remember this?" "I remember," he whispered. "That man," May said, pointing at Caleb on the step, "did not believe any of those things. He looked at me on the first day, and he saw me, and he treated me as a person. He gave me a room with a lock that I could use against him if I wanted. He waited until I knew my own mind before he asked for my hand. He has never once, in 3 years, raised his voice at me. He has never once told me I was stupid. He has never once made me feel small. Do you understand the difference between this man and you?" Mr. Lee was weeping openly now. He nodded. "I have a daughter now," May said. "She is 3 years old. Her name is Sarah Lynn. She is asleep in this house. You will not see her today. You will not see her ever. Do you know why?" "Why?" Mr. Lee whispered. "Because the only thing I owe you," May said, "is the lesson you taught me, which is what I will never do to my own child. You taught me that lesson very well. I thank you for it. It is the only thing of value you ever gave me. I will use it every day of her life. But you do not get to meet her. You do not get to hold her. You do not get to be the grandfather who comes for Christmas. You sold that. You sold it for $100. You took the money. The sale is final." Mr. Lee was on his knees now. He had sunk down without seeming to know it. "May," he said, "daughter, please. I have nowhere to go. I am old. I am dying. I have no one." May looked at him for a long time. "That is true," she said, "and it is sad. I am sorry that it is true. I do not wish it on you. I do not wish it on anyone." She turned and went into the house. She came back a moment later. She was carrying a small leather pouch. She held it out to him. "This is $100, she said. "It is the same amount you sold me for. Caleb has agreed that we will give it to you. It is enough to get you to a town where you can start again, or it is enough to drink yourself to death, or it is enough to buy a ticket on a train and go wherever you wish to go. We do not care which one you do. After today, you are not our problem. After today, you do not come back. If you come back, my husband will shoot you, and I will not stop him a second time. Do you understand?" Mr. Lee took the pouch with shaking hands. "I understand," he said. "Then go," May said. He stayed on his knees for another moment, as if hoping that something else would happen, that she would soften, that she would cry, that she would offer him a meal at least. She did not. She stood there with her hands folded, and she waited, and her eyes were the eyes of a woman who had decided a thing and would not be moved. Mr. Lee got up. He walked back to the wagon. He climbed up. He turned the mules. He rode away. He did not look back, because there was nothing to look back at. The road was long and dusty, and the sun was hot, and somewhere down that road there would be another town, and in that town he would either start a new life or end the old one, and either way it would not be his daughter's concern. May watched him go until he was a small dark shape against the pale hills. Then she watched the place where he had been. Then she turned to Caleb. "Was that cruel?" she said. "No," Caleb said. "It felt cruel." "It wasn't cruel," he said. "It was honest. There's a difference. Cruel is what he did to you. What you did is honest. They look the same sometimes, but they aren't." She thought about that. She nodded. She went inside. She finished making the bread. The baby woke up from her nap and called for her mother. May picked her up. She held her against her chest. She walked through the house with her, slowly, and she whispered to her in 2 languages, things that the baby did not yet understand, but that the baby would understand one day when she was older. She whispered, "You are smart. You are loved. You are seen. You will never have to learn what your mother had to learn, because I am your mother, and I am paying attention." Caleb stood in the doorway and watched them. He did not say anything. He did not need to. That is the end of the story, but it is not quite the end of the meaning. Some years later, when Sarah Lynn was 11 years old, a traveling preacher came through Red Hollow. He gave a sermon in the small church on the subject of forgiveness. He said that forgiveness was a gift, and that those who could not forgive were chained to those who had wronged them. Sarah Lynn came home from that sermon thoughtful. She asked her mother about it at supper. She asked if her mother had forgiven the grandfather she had heard about, the one who had given her mother away. May put down her fork. She thought for a long time. Caleb watched her and waited, because he had learned over the years that the best thing to do when his wife was thinking was to be quiet. "Forgiveness," May said finally, "is a word that means different things to different people. To some people it means that the bad thing no longer hurts. I do not think that is true forgiveness. The bad thing always hurts, if it was truly bad. To some people it means that they pretend the bad thing did not happen. I do not think that is forgiveness either. That is forgetting, and forgetting is dangerous, because then the bad thing can happen again." She picked up her fork. She put it down again. "To me," she said, "forgiveness means that I do not let the person who did the bad thing have any more of me than they already took. I do not give them my anger, because my anger is mine, and they do not deserve to have any of me. I do not give them my dreams, because my dreams are mine. I do not give them my forgiveness either, because that would be a gift, and they did not earn a gift. I give them nothing. I keep everything. That is what forgiveness is to me. It is not letting them have anything else." Sarah Lynn thought about it. She was 11. She was already very smart, because she had been told every day of her life that she was smart, and she had believed it, and it had become true. "That sounds hard," Sarah Lynn said. "It is hard," May said. "It is the hardest thing I have done, but it is the only thing that worked." "Did it make you happy?" May looked across the table at Caleb. Caleb looked back at her. Tom was at the table too, an old man now, his bad eye gone milky, his good eye still seeing everything. Mrs. Halloran's youngest, who often ate with them, was at the foot of the table eating biscuits. "Yes," May said, "it made me happy. Not because I cast him out, because by casting him out, I made room for everyone else." Sarah Lynn nodded. She did not fully understand. She was 11. She would understand later, when she was older, when she had her own life and her own choices, and she would remember this conversation, and she would understand it then. That was how the important things got passed down, not in a single moment, but slowly, year by year, in small sentences across supper tables, in the small repeated kindnesses of being seen by the people who were supposed to see you. Mr. Lee died in a boarding house in Stockton when Sarah Lynn was 23. A letter came from the man who had run the boarding house. The letter said that Mr. Lee had spoken often, in his last weeks, of a daughter he had wronged. The letter said that he had asked to be forgiven. The letter said that he had hoped, in his last hours, for a visit that did not come. May read the letter. She put on the table. She looked at it for a long time. Caleb was old by then. His hair was white. His hand shook a little when he held a coffee cup. He had not stopped loving her, and she had not stopped loving him, and there was nothing in their house that was not, by then, the result of the two of them having chosen each other every morning for many mornings. "Are you going to go?" he asked. "No," she said. "Are you going to write back?" "No." "All right." "Caleb," she said. "Yes." He hoped for a visit that did not come. That was what the letter said. "Yes, I am thinking," she said, "that this is the moral of my life." "What is?" "That hope is not enough," May said. He hoped for a daughter who would forgive him. He did not become a father who deserved to be forgiven. Hope without becoming is nothing. It is air. He hoped, and he did not become. And so the hope was empty, and he died with empty hope. And that is the saddest thing I can think of, and it is also exactly right. She picked up the letter. She walked to the stove. She opened the stove. She put the letter in. She closed the stove. She came back to the table. She sat down. Caleb put a shaking hand on top of hers, and her hand was no longer the small, careful hand of a girl who had been told she was nothing. Her hand was the hand of a woman who had become, every day, year after year, the person she would have wanted as a mother, and the person she had needed as a daughter, and the person she had decided, against every voice that had told her she could not, to be. Outside the window, the wind moved through the pines on the south slope, where there were 3 graves now under the pine tree. Caleb's first wife, and Tom, and old Mr. Chun, who had come from Wallace in his last years to live with them and had been buried where he asked to be. There would be more graves there in time. There would be Caleb's grave and May's grave. There would not be Mr. Lee's grave. Mr. Lee was buried in a pauper's plot in Stockton, with no marker, because he had not earned a place under the pine tree, and there was nothing sad about that. He had made his choices. They had made theirs. The pine tree did not hold grudges, but it also did not give shade to those who had not planted themselves nearby and tended their growth. Sarah Lynn grew up. She became a teacher, and then a doctor, the first Chinese woman doctor in that part of the country. She married a man who looked at her the way her father had looked at her mother, and her children grew up being told every day that they were smart and loved and seen. And the lesson, the real lesson, the one May had spent her whole life learning and then teaching, was this: that the worst thing one human can do to another is to look at them and not see them, and the best thing one human can do for another is to look at them and see them clearly, even if what they see is small and quiet and easily mistaken for nothing, because what looks like nothing, looked at carefully and with respect, often turns out to be a whole world, and a whole world, given the chance, can save a ranch, can win a fight against a powerful man, can raise a daughter who will save lives, can outlast every cruelty that ever tried to make it small. Mr. Lee had thought his daughter was stupid because he had never looked. Caleb had looked. That was the entire difference. That was the whole moral. That was the biggest mistake Mr. Lee ever made, and the best decision Caleb ever made, and the reason the story is worth telling. Look at the people in front of you. Look at them carefully. You will be surprised what is there. You will be surprised, sometimes, what was there all along.